Let's do a little mini video on domain and range. Let's see if we really understand it. So we look at this XY plane and notice that I have a line segment right here. Okay, it's not a line where it continues with an arrow and it continues with an arrow forever. I actually put endpoints right here and right here. Okay, and this one is not a line. It's actually a, if you've taken geometry, what's it called? Array. It has one endpoint and it continues in one direction forever. Now, even though on this line segment you only have two coordinates shown, how many coordinates are really in between these two? There's a bunch of coordinates, right? I mean, you could say the coordinate 0, 1 is right there. You could say halfway to 1 and positive 1 and something, or positive 2. But there's technically many, many coordinates right here if you're talking about decimal values or fractions. So let's talk about the domain of this line segment and the range of this line segment. So when I say domain, I'm talking about the x values, all right? So if I want to state the domain, I'm talking about the x values, which is really the x-axis. Where is this segment at? Is it at x equals 4? Check it out. 1, 2, 3, 4. Is it anywhere right here? No. Is it at x equals negative 2? Here's negative 2. Is it anywhere over here? No. Is it at x equals negative 1? Yes. Is it at x equals positive 1? Yes. So we know that this segment with regards to x's has to be between this guy and this guy. Does that make sense? Yes. So the domain, and this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to write it as a compound inequality to show what my domain values are. What do I mean by domain? My x values. So my x values are between the negative 1 and the positive 1. And I'm going to put inequality symbols. And if I did put the smaller number on the left and the greater number on the right, then I should have these exact symbols opening to the right. And those are solid dots, so I would put a solid line underneath the inequalities. That's kind of hard to see, huh? Yeah, it is. Okay, let me rewrite that. The domain is x in the middle, negative 1 is a smaller number, positive 1 is a bigger number. They open up to the right, and they're solid dots. So that would be a description of my domain. Questions? So range values are y values. Okay, now what do I mean by y values? Y is going up and down. So maybe this will help you out. The y value here is negative 1. The y value up here is 3. Yeah? Yeah. So in terms of y values, any coordinate on this line, will you have a y value of 5 that's way up here? No. Will you have a y value of negative 3 that's down here? No. It's all going to be between this height and this height. Does that make sense? Yes. So it's going to be between the y value of negative 1 and positive 3. Does that make sense? Yes. So when you're talking about range, you're going to put range is the y values that are all between the negative 1 and the positive 3. Now, of course, you're going to have the inequalities opening up like that. And because these guys are solid dots, you're going to have a solid line underneath it. Okay? So that's the description of your domain, which are your x values from here to here, and the range, which are your y values from here to here. Okay? If it doesn't make too much sense, it's okay. We're going to throw in a little bit of domain and range almost on a daily basis till we get comfortable with domain and range. Let's take a look at this ray right here, and let's state the domain and range of this ray. Okay? So what would the domain be? Well, x is domain, your x values. So what you just said is that the domain is 1, yeah, the x value is 1, and the x value is 4. Could the domain value be 2, for example? Yes. Yeah, because this coordinate right here, 2, negative 2, is also a coordinate on that line, right? So your x value, your domain value could be 1, it could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 5. This arrow means that it keeps going that way forever. So what could x be? What is the domain when you're talking about what x could be?
Any real number.
X is all real numbers?
Yeah.
Okay, could x be 0?
No.
It doesn't have a coordinate right here, does it?
No.
Oh, could it be negatives? No. So x has to be either 1 or greater than 1. And that's exactly what the domain is, that your x values have to be greater than or equal to 1. Does that make sense? How about your range values? Let's think about that. The range values are your y values. So what's the y value of this coordinate?
-2.
What's the y value of this coordinate? -2. What's the y value of this coordinate? -2. What if I were to go out and make this line way out here where we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 and down 2. So this coordinate right here, that would be 8 and -2. What would your y value right there be? -2. So when I'm talking about range, I'm talking about my y values. And what's the only y value that you could get on this ray?
-2.
So you're going to say y equals -2. Does that make sense? Domain and range? A little bit? Okay, go back, watch this at home. That way it'll refresh your memory. And again, we're going to be talking about this on a regular basis till we get comfortable with it. Question? So let me add this on as a final touch. Whoa, that's not good to add on as a final touch. Let's go back to this guy and let's pretend that it was not a segment. Let's pretend that it actually had arrows on it forever. Then your x values, the domain, would not stop at -1 and +1. It would continue to go this way forever, and it would continue to go this way forever. In other words, if I go to +50 and positive, I don't know what huge number that would be, you would eventually get to this line that continues forever. So your domain would no longer be between -1 and +1. Your domain would be all real numbers. X equals all real numbers. Does that make sense? The range value, since range, it's no longer from this height to this height. It's now going up forever and down forever. So the range would be all real numbers. Okay? So I hope this kind of helps. Check it out if you need more help.